Hello, everyone, and welcome to this month's webinar, Candid Conversations, Advanced Therapies for Parkinson's. I'm Donna Greening, Parkinson Canada's Education and Program Innovation Coordinator. Joining me today to welcome you are our two guest moderators, Bryce Perry, Parkinson Canada's Associate Director of Community Outreach and Engagement, and Carrie Lynn Goods, a member of our support and information team. From coast to coast, Parkinson Canada acknowledges the ancestral and unceded territories of Inuit, Métis, and First Nations peoples. To access closed captioning, you can click on the CC Captions button and then click on Show Subtitle. If you have questions about today's topics after the conclusion of the webinar, please contact your healthcare provider or Parkinson Canada's support and information team. When the webinar ends, please take a moment to fill out our survey that we use to evaluate our programming, ensuring that we deliver content that's relevant to the Parkinson's community. Now, let's get started. Motor symptoms associated with Parkinson's are often treated with oral medications. As Parkinson's progresses, oral treatments may become less effective over time, and other treatment options may be considered. During October's webinar, we focused on Duodopa and Vyalev information presented by a movement disorder specialist. Today, we explore DBS, Duodopa, Vyalev, and Focused Ultrasound from the patient perspective with panel discussions moderated by my colleagues Bryce Perry and Carrie Lynn Goods. Our guest panelists, Adele, Gary, David S. and his partner Margaret, Shane, Ken, Lorene, David L., and Andrew are all from the Parkinson's community and have experience with these different types of therapies. They will be sharing their stories with us, but it is important to note that every person with Parkinson's is unique. Not every person with Parkinson's will have the same therapeutic experiences as our guests. Before I turn the floor over to Bryce and Carrie Lynn, let's review each of the treatments. Deep Brain Stimulation, or DBS, is a surgical treatment for Parkinson's that can help with the management of motor symptoms such as tremors, rigidity, and slowness of movement without the side effects, such as significant dyskinesias, that some dopamine medications may cause. DBS surgery is not for everyone who's living with Parkinson's. Certain criteria must be met to be considered eligible for the procedure. For the procedure, a special frame with 2 pins at the front and 2 at the back is attached to the head, guided by MRI imaging. The first portion of the surgery is typically done using local anesthesia while the person is awake so that they can provide feedback to the doctor. The neurosurgeon drills small holes in the skull and implants electrodes in specific regions of the brain using patient feedback and advanced imaging techniques. During the second part of the procedure, the electrodes are connected by wires to a small battery-powered device called an internal pulse generator, or IPG, which is implanted under the skin of the chest. Sometimes these 2 steps are done at the same time, and sometimes they're done separately. Later, after the patient has recovered from the procedure, they attend an appointment where the IPG is turned on and the impulses are set. The IPG then starts sending electrical impulses to the electrodes in the brain, which modulates the activity of those targeted brain circuits, improving Parkinson's motor symptoms. DBS has been commonly used as a second-line treatment for Parkinson's after medications have been tried. More recently, some experts have proposed the earlier use of DBS to prevent medication-related side effects altogether. However, the main challenge of early DBS treatment is that the course of Parkinson's remains unclear and is variable in individuals. Enteral, or direct to the intestine, administration of a medication involves the delivery of a gel form of carbidopa-levodopa, called Duodopa, straight to the gut rather than swallowing pills. Because the medication bypasses the stomach, this type of therapy can improve medication absorption and reduce off times, since delivery is not slowed down by constipation or a slow digestive system. This type of therapy may be considered for individuals who still respond well to levodopa, but have unsuccessfully tried other medications to control their motor fluctuations, but still experience that symptoms and significant off periods throughout the day. It may also be considered as an alternative for people who don't qualify for DBS or who don't want to undergo brain surgery. Surgery is required before starting this type of therapy. During the procedure, a small hole or stoma is made in the abdomen, and a tube called a PEG J tube is inserted directly into the intestine. An external pump, typically carried in a small wearable pack, gets attached to the tube at the stoma, delivering regularly timed doses of the medication directly into the intestine. The neurologist will program the pump based on each person's individual needs. It can also be set to infuse a larger dose in the morning to kickstart the day, and or infuse a limited number of extra doses for those times when more medication is needed. Medication is stored in a single day use cassette, and that cassette can be used for up to 16 hours. Some people may require more than one cassette per day, or they may still need to take pills at night. The pump is not waterproof, so it needs to be removed and the stoma protected before doing anything where the person is getting wet. The PEG J tube needs to be flushed clean with a syringe before and after every pump use to prevent blockages. It's also important to clean and inspect the stoma daily, keeping an eye out for skin irritation or injury. A new to Canada medication delivery method is a 24-hour subcutaneous or under the skin infusion therapy of a carbidopa-levodopa solution called Vyalev. It's a non-surgical option for the management of severe motor fluctuations and hyperkinesia and dyskinesia in advanced Parkinson's. As such, it addresses an unmet need within the Parkinson's community. Before starting this treatment, individuals are trained on how to properly use the medication and its delivery system. Vyalev is a liquid solution that comes in a glass vial, which, on a daily basis, gets transferred to a sterile syringe, and the syringe is then placed into an infusion pump. Throughout the day, the pump continuously releases medication under the skin through a tube that's housed in the pump. Once an infusion site is set up, it can remain in place for up to 3 days, after which time it's necessary to rotate to a new site using a new infusion set. However, if the infusion is interrupted for more than 1 hour, it's necessary to do so sooner. The dose, or rate of infusion, is calculated by the physician based on the individual's needs. Medication vials need to be stored in a refrigerator, or they can be kept at room temperature to a maximum of 30 degrees Celsius for up to 28 days. It's important to note that once Vyalev has been stored at room temperature, it cannot be returned to the fridge. We've also heard from some members of the community that they'd be interested in joining a Vyalev support group. So if this is something, this is something that we are currently considering. In our follow-up email, there will be a link for anyone who is interested in joining the group to put your name on a wait list. And the support group team will reach out to you with details once things are confirmed. Lastly, a collaborative focused ultrasound trial between Sunnybrook and UHN is close to wrapping up. The goal of this trial has been to build on findings suggesting the safety of opening the blood-brain barrier in Parkinson's patients using low-intensity MRI-guided focused ultrasound. The trial also examines the safety of delivering an enzyme replacement into the putamen, a movement-related region of the brain, as a potential way to slow down the neurodegenerative process that causes Parkinson's motor symptoms. Because the trial is still ongoing, our guest will be sharing about his experiences joining and participating in the trial, but not about any of the results. He will also be sharing his thoughts on the importance of participating in clinical trials to advance Parkinson's research. Today's panel discussions will be moderated by Bryce Perry and Carrie Lynn Goods. Bryce is moderating our first panel on DBS. He is Parkinson Canada's Associate Director of Community Outreach and Engagement and has also been living with Parkinson's for the past 14 years. Professionally and personally, he's a passionate advocate for the Parkinson's community and is dedicated to raising awareness, fostering connections, and inspiring hope. Bryce is joined by panelists Adele and Gary. Adele, a retired social worker, is passionate about creative writing. She was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2003 and underwent DBS in November of 2023. Gary, a retired retail distribution center staffer and avid runner who now facilitates a Parkinson's support group, was diagnosed in 2017 and had DBS surgery in February of 2019. And now, Bryce, over to you.
Well, thank you, Donna, for the introduction, and I'm thrilled to be moderating today's first panel on the Deep Brain Stimulation. So, joined by Adele and Gary. And so let's dive right into the discussion and get right into it. So let's start, Adele, let's start with you. So can you share a little bit about the assessment process and what you had to go through in order to get this thing started?
Okay, let me say that I was very anxious about the assessment process because of my age. I was 77 at the time, and it's really the upper limit of what they'll consider for DBS. The purpose is to assess, obviously, the suitability, but for example, they want to assess our response to levodopa, whether we are cognitively impaired, etc. So the first step is to just have a meeting with the powers that be, just to get a little bit of information about us now and the steps that we've taken. They already have our information. So the first thing is the neuropsychological testing. That goes on for 5 hours. It's very grueling. I was so nervous that they turned me down because I didn't do well enough, or I didn't answer the questions intelligently enough. But I did, in fact, I was approved. So that was a tremendous relief. Then after that was the psychiatric evaluation to check that, number one, my mental status, and number two, that I'm not cognitively impaired. So far, 2 down, 1 to go. The third one was the levodopa challenge. It was also a long time, but I had to arrive there without any medication, and they did an assessment on me, and then they gave me medication, the usual Parkinson's medication, and then did a test. They wanted to see that I am responsive to levodopa. The next thing is we met I was approved for all of those. So the next thing was that we met with the surgeon, who is a terrific guy. This is Toronto Western, and he wanted to see whether our desires are realistic, because if they're not realistic, they won't approve us. So realistic is one thing. What else? The time commitment. It's a huge time commitment.
That's amazing. That's a lot of time. So you hope that you're going to pass.
We haven't started. We haven't started yet. But the important thing also is he wanted us to know what the risks are, and the risks are: my age is a risk factor, cognitive impairment is a risk factor, infection is a risk factor, and then, of course, like any surgery, heart attack and stroke. So we had to sign a paper, and by the time I walked out of that meeting, I had a date the next day.
That's so much to consider, and and I think Gary, I'll ask you this as well. Like, there's that. Having heard all of that, can you share what your family? Like, obviously, you went through the same process and different things, but how did you share that with your family? What did your family think of this thought of you having this done?
Well, I think right from the beginning, my first neurologist, he was the one who introduced me to this, and I started investigating it. Just to correct Donna, she mentioned I was 2017. I was actually diagnosed in 2014 and had the procedure done in 2019. But my family, they were pretty open to it. My wife, I think I recall her saying, a friend of hers asked her, why are you letting him do this when something could terribly go wrong? And her reaction was, well, if I don't, if I say no and everything goes fine, and, there's always that slight chance, but she didn't want to be the one who put that pressure to say, no, you shouldn't do this. She was open to it. We had long discussions about it. Now, my mother was a completely different story, and but I was very encouraged to get this going. I wanted it done right away because I felt like I was just becoming a garbage pail for pills, and I was up to 15 or 17 pills at that time, and I didn't see any end to it. We couldn't get on top of the tremors. I was always shaking, and so.
Wow.
But
Wow. Well, I mean, it's important to have that, and what great support that is to have, and again, it's so, I think when you hear something like when someone says, why are you going to let him do this, or why are you going to let them do that? I think, when you think of this surgery and you think of it, it's brain surgery. So,
mm-hmm.
and no, so maybe Adele, like what was the procedure like? Like, and I know we have some photos, I think, as well, but Adele, like, what was it like going through this, and were you scared? And really, that's our big question.
That picture was taken after, maybe 5 minutes after the surgery, after I had come back to my room. Well, that's a different one. That one was taken before.
Okay.
It's called a halo, and it's attached to my head in the front and the back, and you can see it presses into the forehead a little bit. But they do that so that they can attach you to the bed so that you don't move your head.
Are you smiling? Are you actually smiling? Or were you not scared, Adele?
I wasn't, it's funny, I was not at all scared. For some reason,
Wow.
I'll never understand. I was excited. I was actually excited right through, beginning to end.
Wow.
And I made up my mind that I wasn't going to let pain get the better of me. I was just going to do some deep breathing and, keep myself calm. And I was successful in doing it because the whole thing is done not under anesthetic. And there are some painful parts, but I managed them. That was 5 minutes after the surgery. I was so excited, and I was so happy that I came out alive. And it was
That's
successful.
awesome.
So,
That's amazing. That's looks so good. And Gary, did your procedure go smoothly?
Well, it went smoothly to a point. I did have a few situations there for some reason when they were cutting the side of the head and pulling the scalp back. The little pain killer injection they gave me didn't seem to take. So I was like, at one point, I was kind of screaming loud, and, like they ended up putting more injections in to cut the pain down. And then one of the things about this surgery is being awake through the whole thing, which creates I mean, for me, I just was over with too much anxiety. I really stressed myself out. But a good example of this was when they placed the electrode into the left side of my brain. They turned it on to see if it was working and everything, and they could tell by the look on my face something was wrong. I couldn't say what it was. All I wanted to do was cry. And it wasn't because I was in pain. It was over, just overcome with emotion. And the surgeon kept asking me, are you feeling dread? Well, I couldn't think of what the heck dread meant. And they shut it off. They said, well, what was going on there? The look on your face was horrifying. And I said, well, all I wanted to do was cry. And they pulled the lead out. They weren't sure if it was the lead or what, but it ended up being from the MRI machine right beside them, the scan, they realized they were 2 millimeters out of being in the correct spot, which that's why they want you awake so they can see what's going on. It must have hit a spot that controls all your emotions or whatever. But so once we got that right spot and everything was moving along fine, then
Amazing. Amazing.
So
That's amazing. And I guess, again, part of that cloud can be scary, but you both kind of came through it. And I understand that I understand there's two parts of this, right? There's getting the surgery, and then Adele, and I'll start with you, is now then after you get that done, now you have to go through a programming experience. So, and I understand that, it took several months to get that right. So we kind of tell us a little bit about that?
Well, first of all, we didn't even know what it was until we actually went there. The programmers are experts. I mean, it's all done through computer. And when they did the surgery, they collected information by asking me to do things and recording the best level of it. So, for example, let's say count up to 10, count up to 10 louder, count up to 10 louder. And then they found the balance and keep it. So the programming used that information to set me as a starting point. But what was frustrating about that is that we're only there every 6 weeks. It's a different person each time, but the main doctor comes in at the end. But it took him about 9 months to get me right, and I'm really in good shape now because of that.
Oh, wow. And Gary, what about you? What was your programming? What was that like?
We started off and very slowly. I was having a lot of difficulties in the beginning, and so they kind of every week I was going in for 5 weeks in a row. Every week they'd send me home and say, okay, well, just bring it up 1 point one day, then go to the other side, bring it up until we can get you up to the right level. Then the pandemic hit, and that kind of shut everything down for a while. So I was back to doing phone appointments with them. And I think it was around after the 2 year mark, I finally got back in there. And one of the nurse practitioners, Alex, he's an amazing person. He redid all the settings. I walked out of there. I walked up Bathurst to the subway, and I was just like skipping. I was so happy. I felt so much of a difference. And ever since then, I've been back golfing, running, I'm cycling all the time. And, I really feel like I've got a good part of my life back. So that was kind of tough start to it, but I stuck with it. I wasn't going to give up on it. I wasn't going to criticize it or anything like that. So I'm glad
so
you're
not letting those limitations limit you. You're right. Is that
I keep going. I don't think I have there's nothing. You just have to keep going, right? Like and I think it's so important for everybody, no matter what they're going through. It's all about the proper having a good attitude towards things. So
absolutely. And Adele, and I read that you've had experience working with people with chronic illness and whatnot, and you both have said this is a process. This wasn't a short from the the even just getting accepted and going through that, and then the programming. It's amazing. So did working with people with chronic illness, how did it help you prepare? Did it help you prepare, and how did it help you prepare?
Yeah, I want to say two things. One is, yes, it did help me prepare in that I knew I had worked there for 18 years, and I knew that people do eventually cope, no matter that I think they weren't in the beginning. And that kept me going. And I really knew that in the end I'd be okay. The other thing I wanted to just mention is advocacy. I am the queen of advocacy. When I decided to pursue this, I started off writing a letter to my movement disorder specialist explaining to her exactly why I needed it. Then the next thing, and she handed it in. The next thing I had to have an MRI, and you know what the wait lists are like. So I started searching around, and I found one that would see me in 2 weeks. That all the information was submitted, and then I started calling the receptionist. Nicely, I was cooperative, I was polite, but she knew who I was, and I was done within 4 months from the day I was referred until the surgery, which was done in November of last year. And I think because of my advocacy, I really pushed myself, nicely, politely. But it's really important for people to advocate for themselves and not to sit back and wait.
Yeah, like you took hold of it and you just make sure that's amazing. Like it's so important to advocate for ourselves in all areas with doctors and whatnot.
Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, you know, Gary,
Hmm.
you've offered to demonstrate turning your DBS off.
Right.
And are you
Yeah.
still comfortable with that today? Oh,
Sure.
I guess we
Yes.
are. Okay.
No, I just turning this little thing on. So I'm going to
Okay.
shut it off right now.
Okay.
And usually the first thing that starts is I can feel it in my voice, and the tremors are it it
That was fast. Like that was
it
very quick, Gary.
it it's so hard to talk, and so now I'm going to turn it back on, and now we're back, and
Wow.
it's amazing how quickly this thing works.
That's
You know,
wild. I
it
did, Gary, I
it's
didn't
like
realize it'd be that quick.
it's like flicking a light switch. So, but I know the first thing when I started turning it off is I notice it takes my speech. It's so hard to try and talk and with this thing off, and then once it comes back on, away we go again. So
It was amazing to me how quickly the symptoms came back and then how quickly they went away. And
yeah, yeah,
that was amazing.
yeah,
Do you still have to take pills as well, or is it just
yeah. Is that for me or?
sure, Gary? Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
sure.
Gary, I'll ask you both.
Yeah. So I'm still taking levodopa pills. I'm on 7 a day. Then I'm also taking some other pills to help with the fatigue and for cognitive issues, low attention span, and I don't drive anymore. So there are, other things there with Parkinson's. There's so many non-motor symptoms, and it's amazing how all
Wow,
these people think of rigidity, slowness, and shaking, but there's 20,
there's so
at
much more.
least 20 other things
There's
going
so
on.
much more. I agree. And
Yeah.
thank you so much for doing that. I don't know how comfortable I would have been doing it if I had done it. So thank you for that. And Adele, one thing you mentioned at the beginning, how excited you were. You were so excited. And that's resonating with me still, how excited you were to get this done. And back to what Gary and kind of what Gary said as well, is that there's so many things that he is dealing with and we all deal with this. And so to know that there's something better out there, it's exciting. So could you share maybe just with our audience, like what would you tell somebody right now who's watching or listening to this and is considering DBS or is like thinking about it? What would you say to that person?
Two things. One is when we drove home from the hospital, my husband and I were just we were ecstatic. I'd come out of the safety. I was okay. There was no heart attack. There was no stroke.
Mm.
It was just an amazing experience. Even now, when we look back on it, we smile. What would I tell people? I don't think we have a right to tell people to encourage people to go for this sort of thing. What I would say is, for me, it was an incredible experience from beginning to end, and it certainly has helped me. It's helped me a lot.
No
Um,
regrets.
no regrets at all.
Mm.
Awesome. I love that. And Gary, what about
Imagine.
you? What would you say to somebody out there?
Well, for me, I do try to mentor people on whether or not they want to go through this. I make sure they understand this is not my decision for them to make, for me to make their decision. I'm not a doctor or anything. I've gone through it. They have to realize it's not going to cure your Parkinson's. It's a bigger band-aid on top of the levodopa. So, but I just try to be honest with them, tell them everything I went through, and it's not a cure though. So
And no
hopefully we
regrets, no
get
regrets
there.
for you.
None at all. I am so glad I've had this done, and it's allowed me to continue on with a lot of my life. I have to break down and sleep quite a few times, a couple of naps every day and stuff like that. But I've
I
got
just,
no regrets.
I
can I
love
just
that.
mention that I had to have the neuropsychological test again the year after it was done last time. They wanted to see whether there was any harm done from the DBS. There was none. I did well.
Wow.
Good.
Wow.
It
Well, you
was,
know what? Thank you both. I really appreciate you sharing with us today.
A
You're very
pleasure.
inspiring, and you may didn't know this, but there's somebody actually was been contemplating this whole thing. So it was inspiring to me. I hope it was inspiring everybody else. But thank you for sharing, and Donna, we'll turn it back to you.
Oh,
thank you.
thank you so much, Bryce, Adele, and Gary. Carrie Lynn will now moderate our Duodopa panel. She's a member of Parkinson Canada's Support and Information Team. Next month, she will be celebrating her 6th anniversary at Parkinson Canada, and many clients who reach out to us seeking information, resources, or the warmth of a friendly ear will have had the pleasure of connecting with her. Carrie Lynn is joined by David and his partner Margaret, and by Shane. David, a retired Red Cell chef, was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2011 and began Duodopa therapy in December of 2023. Shane, a retired member of a retail distribution center, was also diagnosed in 2011 and started Duodopa in August of 2021. Over to you, Carrie Lynn.
Thanks so much, Donna, and welcome everybody. And I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to speak with David, Margaret, and Shane. Shane, can we get you back on camera? Can you turn your camera back on? Okay. So we'll wait and see if Shane can get back on here. David and Margaret, thank you for taking some time with us today. I know this can be a lot, and we certainly appreciate your lived experience and sharing that with us today. I'd like you to share, if you wouldn't mind, what was the preparation like for you, and how did you prepare to getting the Duodopa pump?
I've been taking medications for quite a number of years after I was diagnosed with Parkinson's, and I basically got to the point where the medications were not doing their job. They were not working as effectively as they were supposed to. So my neurologist started to bring up the idea of alternate medications and alternate treatments. And one of the ones that was mentioned to me was the Duodopa. It was explained to me that this is not a cure, but it would be a way for me to control my symptoms. So I was given some information to think about the different ways that Duodopa would be administered and installed, if that's the right word. And I was very, very nervous about the whole procedure at the very beginning. I had this nightmare image in my mind of being walking down the street with all kinds of tubes flying out from all different parts of my body. But I went online to I guess it would be a small seminar like what we're in now, and I talked directly to several people who had already had the procedure, and they explained to me what was involved, and meeting with those people eased a lot of my discomfort and anxieties.
My understanding, David, was didn't you also have an opportunity to work with AbbVie, the maker of the pump before?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. And I know that we've talked before and you had shared with us that they kind of walked you through some of those things to alleviate some of maybe the practical perspectives or experience that you would have for the pump, and you found that to be helpful, is my understanding.
Yes, I found it to be very, very helpful.
Great. And how long was the recovery once you had the procedure done?
The recovery for me seemed to be fairly quick.
About how long do you think? Like a guesstimate? No.
From surgery to titration was about 2 weeks.
Oh, awesome.
About 2 weeks, but it was The procedure involved day surgery to install this tube into the intestine. It was performed with conscious sedation and no pain during the procedure. That's what he said. And the recovery time was 1 to 2 hours at the hospital while under anesthetic. They wanted to make sure everything was fine. Sent him home. Took acetaminophen for the pain. But almost 2 weeks until the stoma healed enough to begin titration.
Right. Thank you. Shane, so good to see you. I'm glad you were able to join us and hop back on and our technical difficulties were solved.
I'm out of the light, back in the light and out of the dark.
Ready to go. I know that you had generously offered to show us your Duodopa system and how it's hooked up. And would you mind sharing that with us right now?
Do the best I can. And my foot's been asleep, so let's see how far I stand.
Okay, well,
I'll give it a
you
try.
let me know. You don't have to.
Oh no, I got to do it now.
Okay.
I got autograph sessions coming up soon.
Okay.
Wait 1 second.
Yeah, thanks for that,
That's
Shane.
a bit of a view. Half of it, did you see? The other half is tucked into my shorts, and I wear it all the time.
Yeah, good. Thank you for sharing that with us. I know that gives us all a visual of reality, right? And lets us understand a little bit of what life can be like. I understand that you have 2 pumps. So can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, the concern with living with the Duodopa process is it's good for the day. It's also good for the evening, but you can't use the same pump for the whole time because you have to change the titration or the way the doses are allocated to the body through the pump in 2 different ways. So you wouldn't want to disconnect the pump in the middle of the night and then hook it back up again. So we have 2 different pumps we use. Same style of pump, but the different programming inside. So different doses is being given overnight. So if I'm up walking around, I have to use the washroom, that I'm not worried about falling over, which I can easily do.
There.
It was just on the 1 pump.
So it can be really individualized to your needs, it sounds like.
So I during the week, I get 1 delivery a week, and I get 7 cartridges for one part of the week, and another 7 cartridges for the other part of the week. And that's helping me an awful lot. There's been some challenges in the last little while. I've been falling.
Okay.
And that's some pretty bad falls, but that's a trend for a lot of people, unfortunately. Not a trend, but happening. It's hard to get around sometimes. You know, you're going to live with it, and the best you can do is day by day.
Yeah. Keeps you on your toes and adapting a lot, hey? But it's giving you some plateaus. Is that?
For sure.
Yeah.
I'm not running out of Duodopa, the gel. I don't run out now during the night. That was the concern before.
Right. So I'm just wondering, what made you look at getting the Duodopa pump? And were there any other therapies that you had considered, or was Duodopa the one that felt right for you? Or what was that like for?
Duodopa was one of the few that I investigated. The first one was the DBS. And I felt for myself, DBS may be fine for some people. I wasn't ready for it. I have trouble going to the dentist, never mind having someone drilling the top of my head. So I give the people credit who are the pioneers of this operation. I give them credit for what they've done for a lot of us. So then when it came to Duodopa, I thought, well, I'll give it a try. It's still a bit more of my body available to look after and treat what's going on with my Parkinson's, because it had progressed rather quickly to the point I was taking around 15 pills levodopa pills during the day. And then I'm bringing me up to about 21 pills a day with the inclusion of some of the agonists, as in our inhibitors pills too. So they all played a part, but they all helped me quite a while to getting that far. But to go to Duodopa was the next step, and that was an interesting challenge. And similar was mentioned by Margaret and her husband, that the epi people were very good to support me, get me out of the gate, the frame of mind that I wanted to be positive. And I really enjoyed it. It was a good experience to have this surgery done. But there was one catch at one time, because they couldn't get me an anesthetic. They couldn't get me put out. So they were wrestling with me on the table to try and put me down, to try and get it. But it was okay.
Well, and I'm glad you're with us then today.
Yeah. And then
Gosh, that sounds like a lot to handle. David and Margaret, can you tell me a little bit more about what made you look at getting the pump?
At the time when my medications were not working properly, I sat down with my neurologist and we discussed various different alternate treatments. And my neurologist said almost right from the start that she did not think I would qualify for the DBS.
Okay.
I can't remember the reasons she explained to me, but we decided that Duodopa might be the best answer for me. So they put my name on a waiting list of alternate treatments, and one answer that came back was the DBS. So they started to make arrangements for me to receive. Duodopa. They started to make arrangements for me to be a recipient of that.
Great.
It was a very short period of time, just maybe 3 months.
Okay.
Initially, they told me that I was on a waiting list. It would probably take about 15 to 16 months.
Yeah.
But once they submitted my name, the approval came back very quickly.
Good. I'm glad to hear. And how has it been learning to use the pump and the cartridges that are involved? How's that been for you and your family?
I was given full instructions on how to use the Duodopa machine, and I did not find any too difficult at all. I thought it was rather easy. It was just a matter of procedures. As long as you follow the procedures correctly, then everything is just fine.
We had super support too from the company themselves and from the Duodopa nurse who offered to let us do video calls when we did the first startup and the second startup and the closing down and the cleaning of the tubes and actually even looked at the stoma a few times, make sure it was healing right. We had super support, so it was kind of scary before you did it for the first time. Once you did it for the first time, it was pretty easy.
Good to hear. Shane, I'm just wondering if you could share with us, have you had, any frustrations, and you sort of alluded to being held down to get you comfortable. So aside from that, did you have any other frustrations in getting the pump set up for yourself?
Actually, the support from the advocate team has been amazing. They really helped me a lot, peace of mind for myself and for my wife, because we went through a situation where I was being booked for the procedure, and my wife got breast cancer. So that changed her whole outlook and where we had to go. So focus was on her, and it's paid off. And I was able to wait, and when it was time to go back in, then the COVID came. So I waited again. So I eventually had mine done in August of 21. But you know what? It's worth the wait, and my wife's much better.
Yeah.
But that was all those things that just threw at you that had nothing to do with the process, but all the circumstances around your life that play a part too. And very good support from the nursing staff.
Good.
I've been doing it since 2021, about 3 or 4 years on my own. Now the nurses come in on occasion. So very, very pleased with how that went. But nothing that really stuck out. Although I guess I could say one thing is when you're wearing dress clothes but you're wearing a belt with the Duodopa inside, you sometimes forget that when you have to use the washroom, it's not that easy in there. And one time I was left in the washroom with the power off because there was no motion sensors weren't working. I wasn't moving because I couldn't get my pants down off. So that was
stuck.
Nothing like yelling, "Hey, I'm a man in the washroom. I need help." It didn't go too well.
That's a good story. Thanks for sharing, Shane. Real life, huh?
Yes, unfortunately, I may make light of a lot of things, but it's my way of dealing with what's going on.
Fair.
And
Fair.
we're in a stage right now where my Parkinson's has pushed me towards a retirement living, and we're moving, and it's changing because I've been falling a lot lately, and it's not fair to people around me that are counting on me, and I'm not able to do what I can do if I've been falling and all the things like that. So.
I know David and Margaret, you had shared with us in our dialogues leading up to this that Abby, you've mentioned here too, that Abby's been very supportive, but in traveling or some of those adaptations that you've had to make, there was some key tips I know you'd shared with us and what that can, some added dimensions to consider. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
When I was talking to the company about traveling. They gave me a cooler and instructions on how to keep my Duodopa gel cool. It has to be a very specific rigid temperature frame. So the instructions they gave made it a lot easier. It also makes me more aware of what you're doing.
Some real planning is needed then, right?
And how you do it, and almost an itinerary or a plan to show what you're trying to do.
Really important to keep your medication cool, and they give us ice packs and a cooler bag, and also the nurse gave us a letter to have with us when we traveled that talks about the metal in the tip of the tube and explaining the necessity of carrying the liquids with us in the cabin, because usually you can't have liquids with you.
Right.
But this is super important. And at home, we store it in a medium-sized bar fridge because we want the medication in its own area.
Right.
Because it has to be stored between 2 and 8 degrees, very specific.
So some really purposeful planning and adaptations and considerations for the medications. And so just quickly in summation and to finish up our little section here, I'd like to quickly hear from both of you about, so maybe we'll start with you, David and Margaret, and we'll finish up with Shane. What would you tell someone quickly that's considering getting the pump? Were there any words of wisdom for us that you'd have to add in?
Well, it's natural and normal to have doubts and hesitations about anything new. So I would say to the person, it's your decision that you have to make, but try and do research on the procedure. Get as much information as you can, because with knowledge we learn to overcome our fears.
Yeah, thanks for that. Thank you for joining us. And Shane, how about yourself? What would you quickly tell someone that's considering the pump?
I'd ask them to research it for sure, and maybe ask some probing questions just to get a little deeper. How someone feels about having this kind of surgery and what it does for them, and what the offsets are if you don't. And it's a long life either way with Parkinson's, and you might as well make it the best you can. And if there's services available and there's people out there that want to help, search them out, and because they do want to help. And it's just like our group here now, a lot of us are volunteers doing this, so everyone's a volunteer doing this, but just like they're speaking up and sharing the word to other people. I think it's amazing. It makes your day a little brighter. You have people that are willing to support you, and count on family. Family's very important for sure.
Great. Well, thank you very much for sharing your experiences and for being vulnerable with us. Donna, I'll throw it back to you. Thanks.
Thank you, Carrie Lynn, David, Margaret, and Shane. Our next panel on Vyalev will be moderated by Bryce. Joining him are Ken, Lorene, and Dave. Ken is a retired physician who was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2016 and started Vyalev therapy in June of 2024. Lorene is a photographer who was diagnosed with young onset Parkinson's over 20 years ago and began Vyalev infusion therapy 5 years ago as a clinical trial participant. Dave, a retired lawyer and avid runner, was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2004. He had DBS surgery in 2011 and began Vyalev infusion therapy in April of 2024. Bryce?
Thank you, Donna. Thanks for transitioning us into the Vyalev panel. And so Ken, Lori, and Dave, let's just get started. So Ken, I'm going to start with you.
Sure.
Why did the doctor, or why do you think the doctor suggested Vyalev for you, and how did you decide to proceed with it?
Yeah, no problem, Bryce, and thanks for the opportunity to be here. My diagnosis was, as mentioned, in December 2016, and at that time, my Parkinson's was fairly mild, just some mild tremor, some stiffness and rigidity, and I started on the oral replacement therapy at that particular point in time, and then it gradually increased in dosage over a period of years. So I had different medications added on as well. I had a dopamine agonist added to my therapy, and then also had an enzyme inhibitor added as well. What happened though, and which really changed the scenario for me and my family, was that about a year ago, I started developing some fairly significant mental health symptoms. And I was experiencing rather unusual hallucinations, had some visual hallucinations, some auditory hallucinations, And I had a lot of delusionary thinking around that as well. And I didn't really recognize it because it seemed so real to me. Everything that I was experiencing I thought it was actual, what was going on around me. And it was super scary because I thought these delusions were leading me to think that my family was trying to cause me harm. And it got so far around last Christmas that I actually ended up making a plan to leave my family. And thank goodness they found out about what was going on soon enough that they took action and made an effort and to get me to realize what was happening to me and to make plans to get changes in my care. So I went through an inpatient treatment program, got that sorted out, and at the follow-up in the new year of 2024, my neurologist mentioned that Vyalev was coming on the market and going to be available in Canada. Would I like to try it? Now, I have been on the referral list for Duodopa, for DBS, but I wasn't quite there yet. And so I thought, there's an opportunity for the Vyalev to start sooner rather than later. And so in June of 2024, this year, I went through the process of being screened and sorted out and started in June, and it's worked real well for me.
Wow. That's scary. That's wild, man.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, Lorraine, so how yourself? So obviously everybody has their different journeys. So maybe, and can sound scary. Did you experience the same thing, or what influenced you to take journey with Vyalev?
No, I didn't experience the same thing, and I'm sorry you had to go through that, Ken. It sounded very, very challenging. I was just seeing my movement disorder specialist. I've had Parkinson's for 22 years now, and so I was getting to the point where oral medication wasn't quite cutting it. I was starting to get dyskinesias, and I was on a roller coaster all day, off on, and so I thought there might be something else out there. My neurologist suggested that I sign up for or that there was a subcutaneous infusion trial that was starting in 2019, I believe, the fall of 2019. So I didn't sign the consent form right away. I was dragging my feet, and in the process, I got bumped out, and I didn't get called into the trial until somebody ahead of me failed their screening. So whoever they were, thank you for allowing me to take their space. So I won't drag my heels quite so much anymore. And so I've been in the trial since January of 2020. And it's been a long ride, but overall, yeah, it's been great, life-changing, I think. Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm so glad that it was approved this year so that other people could start using it. So it's fabulous. Yeah.
That's amazing. Well, thank you for being here as well. And I hope, getting that word out as well. And that's kind of a real conversation that we're having, the good, bad, and the ugly, and what works. And Dave, speaking of which, Dave, I mean, you've had DBS surgery, right? And now Vyalev. So what prompted this addition? You're like, what happened?
The trigger for me was I was out for a walk and I was having an episode with my eyes, and it's like dyskinesia, but my eyes shut and I can't open them. And it's not conducive for going out for walks because you'll veer into traffic or into the bushes. And I went out with my granddaughter. I remember holding her little hand. It felt funny. And that's when I decided I had to do something. So that's when I talked to the doctor about having the Vyalev.
Wow. Oh, wow. Okay. It's interesting. Again, all different journeys, all different steps, but there's always that moment when you just have to, it's something that has to happen and change. So, I've also heard, and when we're talking about it, so Ken, there's training, right? Like you go through training with the Vyalev. So could you maybe just, share with us a little bit about what that training looks like when you're getting started?
Sure, no problem. And, as was mentioned earlier, the AbbVie as a company was fantastic in getting me ready for it. There was a nurse coordinator who actually flew over from Halifax. I live in Newfoundland. And so she came to visit me and my wife here. And so they showed us all the supplies and how they worked. So that was the preliminary training in advance of going to see my neurologist in St. John's, and where we went through, a full day of getting the medication started and applying the patch or the cannula properly, setting up the infusion and all that stuff. There's a lot of reading. There's a lot of material. Fortunately, I had, a medical background, so a little bit easier for me. But there is a lot of stuff to learn. And, it took a little while, but got used to it very quickly. I mean, it was a smooth transition. The medication in particular was very smooth. In fact, I had much better results with the solution than I did with the oral medication that I ended up on, because as I mentioned, I had to go through a withdrawal from the other oral medications I was using, and there were periods where I was freezing up for 5 or 6 hours in a row. That would happen potentially a couple of times a day, where I had basically zero mobility. So I went from that to basically having smooth movement for most of the day. There's some slowdown at nighttime when the dose gets lower, but even then, like for me to get up and go to the washroom at night is much easier than when I was on the oral medications, which would sort of the last dose would be 9 o'clock or 10 o'clock at night, right? So big improvement overall, but the training was fantastic. I really didn't find that there was anything complicated and would be a barrier for most people.
Wow. So basically, we're talking like on off and in different ways it's managed. So, Lorraine, how does that Vyalev pump manage the different titrations and the needs for the day?
Yeah, I noticed that Shane with the Duodopa said he had 2 pumps or something, one for daytime and something for night. But this is only 1 pump, but within it, there's 3 flow rates, or the one I have has 3 flow rates that I've used for the clinical trial, which I think is different than the one that actually came to market. So I haven't used the new pump yet, so I'm interested to see what it's going to be like. In any event, you have a flow rate that's sort of set at sort of day-to-day activity, maybe call that F1. F2 would be maybe a higher dosage, which would be maybe for exercise for myself or more vigorous activity. And then F3 would be your lowest flow rate, which would be for sleeping. So you can sort of go through the day, planning your day, what you're going to do. I tend to, if I let's say I wake up at 7:30, at 5:30 in the morning, say 2 hours before, I'll set it to my day rate to get me going. By the time I get up, then you're usually on when you get up. And so it's great to start your day that way. And then as you move through your day, depending on what you're doing, if you have an exercise class, set it up to the other higher dosage. If you need to, give yourself an extra dose, but that's an option. And then making sure in the evening that you turn it down to the sleep rate well in advance of going to bed. I found that if you go to bed with a too high a dose and you just can't settle down and go to sleep because you just have too much in your system. So it took some time, and it's still taking time 5 years later to figure out all the different flow rates and what they can do for you optimally. Yeah.
That's amazing. You know what? I don't even remember being on when I wake up. I don't even remember what that feels like anymore. And it sounds a little bit easier, a little bit than what I do is just carry extra pills in each pocket so that I, manage it as I go. But that's amazing. Dave, you said that you wouldn't mind showing us your what you got on there, just so people have maybe a better idea of what it looks like or what we're talking about?
It's like an old-fashioned cell phone, about the same size.
Okay.
Put it on your belt.
Can you go
Could you
just
back
down
up
a little
just
bit more?
smidge? Yeah, back up just a smidge, Dave.
Oh,
there
there.
we go.
Okay.
So that's what it looks like.
Okay. And you're just wearing that on your belt? Like it's just like a belt, like a fanny pack kind of thing?
That's right.
Oh.
And the syringe is in here, and you change it every day, every morning, and then you forget about it.
Amazing.
A little screen, and it's like a little computer. Yeah.
Yeah.
Has 4 buttons. And this button here is for the extra dose.
Interesting. Cool. And it easy to use, Dave? Like, is it user friendly?
Yes. It tells you exactly what you have to do. It says, please wait. And it's very polite.
Sounds like higher technology than I'm using right now. I'm looking forward to it. Yeah, mine's last generation, I think. Yeah. So that's good.
Always improving, which is a good thing, I guess. That's true.
It only takes about 10 minutes to set up every day.
Okay.
And the 3rd day, you change the cannula site. And that takes another 10, 15 minutes. And it's very simple.
That's really interesting. Well, and have you noticed any difference in your symptoms, Dave? Like,
yes. It's like waves. You get too much and too little. You get this, or you get freezing. And the Vyalev seems to cut off the highs and lows.
Mhm.
So when I was
Interesting.
high, I would retropulse. I'd run backwards. But I actually made a hole in the drywall. I fell into the drywall. So
Wow.
I don't do that anymore. I don't have I don't have the freezing anymore,
Mhm.
which is very bad, as you know.
That's amazing.
And
That's amazing.
ADLs, I can do all the activities of living myself. I don't have to ask for help. I tie my own shoes.
Mhm.
So those are
Well,
important things.
you're getting some independence back.
Yes, very definitely.
Amazing. That's amazing. And Ken, how long did it take you to notice any improvements in your symptoms? Like, is it, we watched the DBS, like bam, 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 and, what's that journey like?
Well, Bryce, it really was immediate. And, I remember when I left the room that day and with the staff, who were my neurologists and the AbbVie staff and the neurology staff at the Health Science Center in St. John's, I said, thank you for giving my freedom back. And that's exactly the way I felt. I felt like now I could move again, that I didn't have to have people helping me all the time and could depend on myself more than having people assist me on a regular basis. And, that's a big goal, I think, that all of Parkinson's patients have, that is, to try to remain as independent as you can. So it was fantastic to have that immediacy. Now it's been, there's been some ups and downs, and like some of the others mentioned, there's periods where it waxes and wanes, but I found that the difference was not like, the highs and the lows that you tend to get with the oral medications. It's much smoother, and it's really great in that regard. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's amazing. And Lorraine, have you had any issues with dosing or anything to that degree? Is it, I know you're on the old model apparently, which you're
Yeah.
going to make sure you kind of move it. But with any issues, like it sounds great, but give me something that maybe is not great or something you had
No, it's
issues
not
with.
great. Well, I think if you're not vigilant and keeping clean and keeping where you do your changing of everything, you can get infections, and
Okay.
that sets you back, and it's hard to manage both that and trying to find where another site can go and that type of thing. And infections can be serious, so just being very vigilant about that. When you do extra doses, I found that sometimes it pools at the site and it gets sticky and can sometimes leak out the
Okay.
cannula. So it makes it hard to remove the pad when you go to change it, because it's a sticky, the medication is it's a liquid, so I think it's quite sticky and tacky feeling. Other things that can go wrong, I guess, yeah, just sometimes you hit a capillary and you get blood in the cannula. So when you take it off, it's like, ooh, big bit of blood comes out. You're like, what's going on there? But it's just that you've hit a capillary, I guess, or something like that. You're the doctor, Ken. I think that's what I'm getting at. Yeah. But
Excellent
my.
description. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm making notes. I'm like, okay, Bryce passes out again.
but
So it's like,
but I concur with Ken and Dave that it's the evenness that
Yeah.
it's going into your
yeah.
system all the time. So you're not on the roller coaster anymore, and you still get highs and lows for sure, but they don't seem as extreme. Yeah. And I think it just seems like I tend to call it, like, I have to, if I feel like I'm sliding off and you're going through an off cycle, I just sit and rest and relax for a bit, put my feet up, and I fill my tank, and it seems to catch up again, and you're good to go.
And you could hit that
Yeah.
booster. You could give yourself a little extra.
That's an option if you need it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't
Okay.
tend to use it too much anymore, but that's just my personal, yeah.
Interesting. Well, and so Dave, we talked a little bit about, independence and stuff and whatnot. What about, like, has it helped you with impacted your confidence or your stress levels?
Yes, it has. Before we get to that, I can see people asking questions about coverage. The government covers it in different provinces. You have to check your own provincial status, but Ontario, BC, Quebec,
Alberta,
that's right.
They're coming on it's slowly, everybody's coming on board. And if you have any questions, if it's available in your area, you can always, I think there's a number as well. They can give us a call and we can help guide them in that as well. So good call it, Dave.
In terms of stress level and anxiety, I find that that's gone down. I'm more self-confident. I don't worry as much as I used to, which is good.
Wow. Okay. This is you guys are you're not salesmen, right? You're not salespeople. Because I'm like, wow, this is amazing. How about this, Dave, or sorry, Ken?
Yeah.
Are there any challenges that you face while traveling with Vyalev? So I'm looking at this and I'm like, I love to travel, and like, how does that work?
Yeah. Well, actually, that was a huge blessing for us because, up to the point where I was doing very unwell from a mental health perspective, we had basically cut out all of our travel plans, and that was a real big goal for us as a couple in our retirement was to, go see the world some more. And so it basically put that all on hold. But when we got through the successful phase with the Vyalev, we decided that this is good. We can make plans again. So we actually went to Florida with some friends recently, a couple months ago, and it was no big deal. Like I thought it was going to be a big deal getting through customs and all that kind of stuff, but it was no problem. Like I had my case with my medication. I just told them when I showed up at the airport, I got this stuff. Do you guys want to see it? And of course they did. But there's just a few minor questions, and they did the pat down because you're not supposed to go through the X-ray machine with the pump. So they'll take us by the side and just do a manual check. And so everything went well, though. Like even when we're coming back from Florida and we're going through customs or the security screen down there, it was no problem. So just plan a little bit in advance and give yourself a bit more time, to get through. But really, it was quite easy.
Wow. Okay. Well, we're getting nearer the end, but Lorraine, I wanted to ask you this, and then I want to two questions really quick. So this one is really quick. What has Vyalev allowed you to do that you couldn't do before? And then after you say it, what would you say to somebody who's hearing this and is maybe considering Vyalev or hearing it for the first time? What would you say to them?
For the first question, in terms of it's not so much what I can do differently, but how I do it differently. So it's like I don't think it lets you maybe, well, for some people it depends on where they're coming from in their journey, but for myself it was like things were starting to go downhill, and so I didn't add a whole new lot of things to my repertoire of what I could do and couldn't do, but I think I could do them better because I felt like I could go to a class and participate better because I knew I was going to be on for most of it, and it just the evenness. I think that's just my key takeaway is that the continuousness is how maybe everybody else who doesn't have Parkinson's gets their dopamine, and that's how it should go into the body, and it bypasses the gut and goes right into your bloodstream, so you don't have to worry about what you're eating, timing of things. So I think that was maybe more the benefit there. Yeah. And in terms of what I'd tell people, I'd say just be very patient with yourself. If you do decide on the protocol, give yourself some wiggle room when you're learning the protocol. Like I'd say 6 months minimum before you feel really comfortable using it. And then, just be vigilant, keep clean. And if you do the work, it could be life-changing. It has been for me. So.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Dave, what about you? What would you say to somebody who's considering Vyalev?
I have the book over there. It says Halifax trip. That one.
I thought you were talking to me. I was getting nervous, Dave. I didn't know what we were talking about.
I'm traveling now, which you couldn't do before.
Look at that. Okay.
Awesome.
Mhm.
That's amazing. Congratulations. That's awesome. And you're so happy. You're smiling away here, and it's so impressive.
We had to ask our family to come visit me last April. And then this September, I went to visit my family in BC. Now we're going to go see the family in Halifax. So that was something we couldn't do before.
Amazing. Dave, I love it. Ken, what would you say?
Well, I think hope is the big thing, right? Because, you get to some points in your disease from time to time where you think things look really bleak and, the road ahead is not so bright. But, I think if you stick with it, if you work with your professionals, if you consider all the options that are out there, and if you're able to access those options, what's happening with treatments for Parkinson's is amazing. And I think people should always hold on to hope and work as hard as they can.
Wow. Amazing. And Ken, really quick, your family's not still trying to get you or take you away?
Oh, no, not at all. They still love me, which is a good thing. And as a matter of fact, you know what? Relationships have improved even better than they were. Every family has trials and tribulations, but all is good here. And we're looking forward to Christmas and having a great time.
That's beautiful. Well, you know what, Ken, Lorraine, Dave, I can't thank you enough for sharing your journeys with Vyalev and with us. It's clear that this therapy has brought meaningful changes to your life. So thank you so much. And with that, I'll pass it back to Donna.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bryce, Ken, Lorraine, and Dave. That was really great. For our final panel, Carrie Lynn is going to be chatting with Andrew, a retired project manager and Parkinson's support group facilitator who was diagnosed with Parkinson's in 2020. In 2023, he began participating in a new clinical trial at Sunnybrook in Toronto, where the goal has been to test the safety of opening the blood-brain barrier and the efficacy of administering an enzyme therapeutic directly to the brain. Because the study is still ongoing, we won't be discussing any results or his perception of how he may or may not be feeling differently, but we are excited to hear about what's been involved in being accepted into the trial, what kind of procedures he's undergone, and what he thinks about being a participant in clinical trials. So over to you, Carrie Lynn.
Thanks so much. Thanks for your patience, Andrew, and hanging in with us till the end here. So I look forward to hearing more about the trial and your experience. Well, not the experience, but what the process of being in a trial and what you would have to share with us. So tell me, why did you participate, or why did you decide to participate and hear about this trial specifically?
Well, initially I was involved earlier with some studies at Toronto Western Hospital in low intensity focused ultrasound. And then I heard about the Sunnybrook protocol, and that they were really at the leading edge of focused ultrasound research. So I contacted them to get involved.
Okay, and so you had alluded to the first trial that you had participated in, the earlier trial you had been a part of. So now, is that one completed, or are you still part of both? Or
no, they're at the Toronto Western's at the early stage of research, phase 1 of the trial. And actually, Sunnybrook is at the early stage as well, but it sounded like that they may be getting deeper into, slowing down Parkinson's and really helping the motor symptoms. The Toronto Western team is at a more preliminary stage, and they're not actually opening the blood-brain barrier.
Okay. So tell me, what things and factors did you consider before your participation in this most recent study?
Sorry, say that again.
So what things did you consider, since you have experience in another study or another trial, before entering into this second trial that you're now a part of? What things did you think about or consider? What were some variables that you wanted to think about before hopping into this one?
Well, I wanted to I'd heard from other sources that the Sunnybrook team was at the leading edge of treatment. They'd had success with the treatment of ALS and Alzheimer's and even dementia, and they were expanding the study now into Parkinson's disease. So I was excited about that, and I felt that it was complementary to what they were doing at Toronto Western as well.
Right. So what was involved in getting involved? So for applying and being accepted into the study?
A lot. I had 4 screening visits over the course of 2 to 3 months. I spent many hours in an MRI, blood tests, mental aptitude testing, all sorts of procedures. I had to travel quite a ways. I live an hour and a half northwest of the city, but the team at Sunnybrook, they accommodated my schedule as best they could, and they made it as easy as possible, tried to combine as many screening treatments or assessments at one time, so I wouldn't have to make another trip. So there was a lot involved, though.
So that was even all the screening before even getting involved.
Oh yeah, that took 2 to 3 months before I got involved.
So a commitment on your end for sure.
Big commitment.
Yeah. And then I understand from what you shared with us earlier in our preliminary dialogue that the study had 3 sessions, I think. Is that what I understand?
Well, yeah, there were 3 treatment sessions. And the first one was to just, the MRI guides the ultrasound to the correct point in the brain. And so the first treatment was just to open the blood-brain barrier. And they delivered no medication, no enzyme.
Okay.
And so that involved going to the hospital very early in the morning, checking in for day surgery at 6:30 a.m., and then getting prepared for day surgery. It's actually not surgery though, I shouldn't, but that's what they call it. There's no incisions or anything like that.
Okay.
So it's quite non-invasive. Anyway, that first one was just to test opening the blood-brain barrier. And then 2 weeks following that, they did it again, but they delivered the enzyme. And so that was considered treatment.
Okay.
And then 2 weeks following that, they did, during those 2 weeks, they did assessments to see if there was any effect. And then the third procedure was similar to the second procedure, but they delivered more medication. And each visit involved a night stay over in the hospitals because they wanted to monitor me and check that the blood-brain barrier was actually closed the next day.
Right.
And it all went very smoothly.
Good. And about how long did those individual sessions take approximately?
Each one was about an hour and a half to 2.5 hours.
In the MRI machine?
Oh yeah, I spent between the assessments, the screening and the actual treatments and then follow-ups, I've spent 30 hours in an MRI.
So how did you manage that? That's a long
Well,
time.
thankfully, I'm not claustrophobic, so I'm okay.
So that's a consideration for people then.
Yeah, I've heard that a number
Yeah.
of people get claustrophobic, so
Yeah.
I wouldn't recommend it for someone who has that condition.
Okay. So tell me, what words of wisdom and recommendation would you have? Why do you think it's important for people to participate in trials, and what would you tell someone, who's maybe considering it?
Well, Parkinson's is a progressive disease. And this research that I've been involved with now since 2021 with low intensity focused ultrasound, I feel it has a chance of making a real difference for people with Parkinson's. And I'm doing it for them, and I'm doing it for myself, frankly. And I think I've been treated so well by the teams at Toronto Western and at Sunnybrook. They give you complete information, and they treat you like a king through the entire process. So it's been a big commitment, but it's also been a good experience.
Good. Well, thank you for that. And thanks for sharing with us here today. It's a big commitment, it sounds like, on your part, but it sounds like, those are the positive ways for us to find out more and to understand more, right? So thank you for that. And thanks for your time today.
You're welcome.
Donna, back to you.
Well, thank you again so much, Carrie Lynn and Andrew. A very special thank you to Bryce Perry and Carrie Lynn Goods for moderating today's panel discussions, and to our panelists, Adele, Gary, David and Margaret, Shane, Ken, Lorene, Dave, and Andrew for sharing your open and honest personal experiences with DBS, Duodopa, Vyalev, and the Focused Ultrasound trial. A reminder that if anyone has questions about these therapies or clinical trials, to please contact your healthcare provider or reach out to Parkinson Canada's support and information team. Watch your email inboxes for our follow-up email that will include a link to a recording of this webinar, as well as any resources or other links mentioned here today. We hope you'll join us for our next webinar on Wednesday, January 15th from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern Time, where we will be discussing Parkinson's psychosis, hallucinations, and delusions. Watch your email inboxes for more details and a registration link. When the webinar closes, please take a moment to fill out our short survey. It helps us plan programming that's relevant to you. On behalf of all of us at Parkinson Canada, I'd like to thank you for joining us, and we wish you and yours a wonderful holiday season, and we hope to see you in January. Take care.